Hi there everybody, I'm Fred Thomas and you are watching All Things Bike, and today we are speaking with Dean Phillips, co-owner of Fitwerx 2 in Peabody, Mass. Dean, thanks for coming down.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Fred.
Hey, anytime. Well, let's talk about the science of bike fitting. Fitwerx 2 is not your standard bike shop. It's a shop that focuses on rider matched bike fitting. The rider is first. I mean, explain a little bit about that.
Yes, with bike fit, we find it's far more beneficial to the customer, to the rider, when they're riding a bike, that they're in the right position on the bike. And what that means is they're in a position, we're putting the seat, the front of the bike, you know, the handlebars or aero bars if it's a tri-bike, in a position where they're generating the right amount of power, where they're comfortable, where it minimizes strain on their joints, and they're not going to get some kind of an injury, where it's a safe position as well. If it's a triathlon or time trial bike like this, that they're in an aerodynamic position. So we'll actually focus on setting the rider up in the right position first. We call that a bike fitting, right, before even choosing their bike. And once their position is set, and we do this on an adjustable size cycle, then we can tell them, there's all these numbers on the size cycle, we can tell them exactly which bikes are best suited for their position. So they don't walk into a bike store, pick, I like that red bike. Right, they take that home and then find out that it's too small or too long to actually get in the right position. So that's the rider map. Rider first is, we focus on the rider, and then afterwards we focus on their best bike options. And it's going to be a smaller selection, but they're going to have that comfort that they're not guessing. They're not wanting. They know it's going to be the right fitting bike.
So it's turned in reverse, essentially. I mean,
it actually is the reverse of the way it's done for a long time in the industry. Then stand over this bike, you like it, ride it, you'll feel better. It might not feel good, but it'll feel better in time.
Hey, it's perfect.
Maybe it does, but this, it takes all the guesswork out. And our experience is that's what the customers want. That's why they come back. That's why they send their friends, is being comfortable and strong and a good fit on that bike. That impacts how much you ride, how much you enjoy cycling. Really, you might be a newer cyclist that it has a tremendous impact of whether you're going to get that bike and keep riding it. If you get the bike and you're uncomfortable, you're just going to set it aside. I don't like riding at all.
Exactly.
So it makes a huge difference for from everyone from first-time cyclists all the way to advanced athletes that. The whole way up.
Yeah. Well, when was the moment of inspiration for this? I mean, did you stumble upon it? Were you fitting your own bikes to yourself, and then did you realize, hey, that I should be doing this more scientifically, or was it a new trend in the industry? I mean, when did it start? And
that's a good question, because it started for me when I got a bike fitting. I was that guy that I got on a bike and. I was having all kinds of pain. This is after I had a back injury and I was a rower, so I started cycling, and I was doing it a ton, and I was getting some knee pain, some back pain, some saddle issues, and then I went and got a bike fitting from a reputable guy, and suddenly I felt great. And I thought it was a fascinating process, so I started fitting guys that would let me. So my Fitwerx, so my current company, Ian Buchanan, one of my business partners, had started a fit studio focused business, a bike store up in Waitsfield, Vermont in 2001. And so Marty and I partnered with him to open our current Fitwerx Peabody location in 2006, and here we are today.
That's fantastic.
So that's all I do. Each and every day is I'm positioning riders on the, doing usually 2 bike fittings and positioning riders, and then helping them select bike options, and people are happy to be there.
Yeah, it's a consultative process, and with a little bit of research, right? So. And you described at first the size cycle and how that science has evolved, right? I mean, I don't know what they used before they had these bikes that have extending stems and seat posts, but talk a little bit about that.
Before size cycles, you get your bike and they'd position you on the bike. So you'd have the ability to put the seat higher or lower usually. Sometimes there's this little stem on the front of the bike there. We could shorten it or lengthen it. So you have a small degree of adjustment. But the trouble with that is you were positioning the rider on the bike. You're fitting the rider to the bike. We fit the bike to the rider. So it's a bit of a reverse, and it was always done. And so once, I'm not even sure who made the first size cycles, but we had Serrata size cycles when we started our business. They were one of the first big fitting certifications in schools you could go to, and they're the ones that delivered that Fit First originally.
Right, and, but then you've evolved it by, I mean, you're taking images of people while they're on the bike, so you can see how their thigh angle lines up and where everything is positioned. I mean, what kind of what happens when a customer comes in and they already have a bike and they say, well, my back hurts. How do you deal with that?
And outside we have a process where we'll ask them a lot of questions. We have a conversation, a background interview about, are they in pain, what hurts, what kind of riding they do, how long they've been doing. We cover a lot of information there. We measure their body as well. So we'll take their existing bike and we measure the bike exactly where the contact points are. We have that all documented. But once the fitting starts, we forget about their existing bike a little bit and we get them on the size cycle. We start them in that position and then we start making all the adjustments that are going to address their concerns. Once we're finished with the size cycle, now we have them in the ideal position. We record that, then we can come back to their existing bike. And ideally, we can adjust this existing bike to match their ideal position. Sometimes we can get all the way there, sometimes you can't because the frame itself might not be the ideal frame for them and it can't actually match their position. So when that's the case, we get them as close as it can be. So they're generally going to be happier, and then down the road they want to purchase a new bike. They at least know what their best position is and what their best option will be at that point.
Right, I see. So the information is better.
The information is better, exactly.
And totally accurate.
Yeah, every person that comes in, even if they have an existing bike, they get their ideal position and then the best possible way they can adjust their bike to match it.
And so you benefit from being fit even to a mountain bike and a road bike, because I think it seems like bike fit, people typically think it might be only for aerodynamic or for time trial bikes
yeah, and that's been growing. You do get fit for both bikes. The difference with a road bike fitting is, unlike a mountain bike, you're generally not moving very much. You're on flat roads most of the time. You're pedaling, speed's not changing as much, grade's not changing as much. So from some perspective, you're an overuse injury waiting to happen. You're just doing the same thing over and over, thousands and thousands of times. So it fits very, very important on the road bike. It's also important on the mountain bike, but on a mountain bike, you're all over the place. You're going up and down hills and you're moving around in the saddle, and so it is important on the mountain bike, but it's not nearly as intensive a process as we have on the road bike.
Right. And what about the trade-off between the pursuit for aerodynamics and someone who comes in who wants to be as aero as possible, and bothersome things like UCI legal regulations? I mean, how do you balance the two?
If you do have an athlete in most of our athletes, far and away, are recreational athletes, cyclists, triathletes, weekend riders, club riders, they might do triathlons. But there are some regulations of how they can be positioned on the bike. So this is for a more advanced athlete that might be going to nationals. So we have to, during the fitting process, keep those in mind. And also, what was the other part of the question?
Some people want to be aerodynamic.
Oh yes, that's what.
And they go into the wind tunnel, and
they want to be as fast as they can be. So they want the front end low. They want to be tight. The trouble is, you can put somebody in a position that they're just not going to stay in that position. So we find you can set them up you can get all three, believe it or not. You can be powerful, you can be comfortable, and aerodynamic. So I find you can actually do all three. There are some cases where if an event's short enough, maybe we can eke out a little bit difference in aerodynamic position where they're not going to be able to stay in that position for hours, but we keep their goals in mind. They don't have to. They're just doing this 3-minute event. Most of the time, you want to be able to ride that position easily for the event you're doing, if it's an hour, if it's a triathlon. Or a lot of road cyclists we see where they're going to be sitting upright on their hands, and they might be riding 100 miles a century. So we need to make sure they're absolutely comfortable. Or they might be a bike racer where they're going to be in and out of other riders, sprinting. So we need to keep that in mind. So as part of the process, we cover what all their goals are, and we give them the best possible position to achieve all those goals.
That's fantastic. And how long does it take? For someone to come in and do the process?
The whole process it's about 2 to 3 hours, because we'll talk like this, we'll do this body assessment, measure all different parts of their body, get them on the size cycle, so get the actual fitting done, we'll document it, we'll make the adjustments to the bike, so the time adds up pretty quickly. So we have all the time. It's a relatively relaxed process, so we have all the time we need to make sure everything's done, and their goal is, they made this trip to come see us. They owe the best possible position on the bike, and they have their bike set up like that. So that's the way we'll send them out the door.
That's great. And is there any important information that somebody who's thinking about doing this should know, or if I'm thinking of doing a fit? Should I book in advance, or should I do it in the winter rather than the summer?
All good question that comes up. One of the best times to do it is the winter, because you can get the bike before the season. The problem is that doesn't happen as much. It's January. People forget about their bike.
But it's 50 degrees out today, so
so they might start. So once the weather starts getting it, we start getting the phone calls. But so any time of year is great to do it. We get, even if I'm injured, there's some issues where you won't want to. So any time is good. All the information is on our website. You can actually see videos of a fitting process happening. A lot of folks, I do encourage, if you have any questions, stop by the shop, give us a phone call. You can ask questions, we can talk you through it. You literally don't need to know anything when you show up, because it's all part of the fitting process. We take you through it. So so you'll have comfort that in the end you didn't need to be prepared. We see a lot of first-time cyclists that really don't know much about cycling, as people won't. So
I mean, you want to get a suit that fits, right? You're not going to sort of go out and buy a suit and say, yeah, it's a medium and it'll fit me.
That's right. And I don't know. I'll go to suit. That's why I'm going to this gentleman, to fit me for the suit, because that's what he knows. And I know I'm going to be comfortable believing that I'm in the right fitting suit. So that's with the bike. They're comfortable that I'm on the best fitting bike now, in the best position I can be, where I'm going to be strong, powerful, aerodynamic with zero bars. And
I have a story about at the national or the World Championships where you have to have your time trial bike set up for UCI regulations, and that's it's pretty simple. You know, the seat has to be back behind the center line of the crankset. And in the UK, it seems like in the local time trial races, you don't have to have your bike set up to be UCI legal, and when you're racing through the season. But so none of these UK guys knew that, and so they turned up at the start of the time trial in Perth and found that their bike didn't pass, and so they had to start chopping. You know, they were trying to replace handlebars, and they were chopping seats. You know, the tips of seats off, and trying to start, and some guys just couldn't even race.
And here you are. You've done all this training. You've done all this planning. You're at the World Championships. It's the day of your race.
It's in Perth, Australia.
Australia. It's not like it's next door. And it's probably the middle of the night for you when you're actually racing. And suddenly you do all your proper planning, and then somebody's telling you your bike's too long, or you got to cut something off, or you got to move your seat back. So it's amazing what can happen sometimes. So we try to plan ahead for that. Where you had to comply by the UCI rules for that event, they actually enforce the rules differently. Like you mentioned with the UK guys, there's some rules that are enforced there. There's other rules that are enforced. But I had to do the international, and track rules are even a little bit different than outdoor time trial rules. So I encourage everybody, call ahead, email ahead. What rules are being enforced? Do I need to follow all the rules, or does it not matter if my saddle's tilted a little bit? Because there's some rules that, it's always good for that peace of mind. So you're not the guy that shows up and he has to cut his aero bar extension shorter, or he's trying to. Some of these changes, these time trial bikes are very integrated on the front end, and some of these changes aren't just loosening a bolt and moving something. You got to take it apart.
A whole new set of bars.
It could be hours, and that's
that's great. That's
a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, if you know, the UCI regulations were always a little foggy to me, but I managed to figure it out. You know, but that was the absolute maximum of my abilities, and only 2 calculations. But knowing that there's someone out there who's familiar with the technical regulations from a fitting standpoint is very much worth knowing about.
Yes.
Well, you've got a location in Peabody, Mass, one in Vermont, and one in New Jersey. And what are the plans for 2018? Any features, rides, events that we should know about?
Yeah, we're still focusing on our 3 locations, and so no new locations. I think that all 3 are doing well. We'll try to sponsor events where we'll see our riders at. They might be triathlons or Grand Fondos, or a lot of this gravel riding is growing. We see a lot of our customers there. And that's a lot of the discussions we're having right now, what's coming forward. So a lot of the same, but it's going to be an exciting year regardless.
Excellent. All right, Dean. Well, thanks so much for coming down and giving us the overview.
So thank you. Thanks for having me, Fred.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. That was Dean Phillips, co-owner of Fitwerx 2 in Peabody, Mass. If you have any questions about fitting, you can see their website. It's all there. That's all we have time for. Thanks so much for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.
All Things Bike with Fred Thomas is brought to you by Zentis, performance carbon wheels handmade in Austria for road and off-road riding. Zentis, next generation wheels. And Frame and Wheel eBay bike selling services. Time, space, cash. Pick 3. And AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future.